Hey everybody, it's Michael Pedone, salesbuzz.com. Thank you very much for joining today's session on cold call training tips for sales managers. By the way, if you're not a sales manager and you're in sales, this will still help you out. I am excited to dive into this proven sales strategies that I'm about to be sharing with you, because not only will they boost your team's confidence on the phones, but it will also help you close more effectively. And that's really, at the end of the day, what we need to do. Sales reps need to be closing more effectively. So today we're going to be covering the practical tips you can implement right away, including your favorite role playing, recording, and all analysis, easy for me to say, and then giving focused feedback. So let's get started. So the first thing is this I want to open up is this to kick things off. Let me just share a quick story. I recently worked with a sales team where call reluctance was a huge issue for them. They were avoiding calls, and even when they did make the calls, their results were lacking. So we did some training, and then we did some regular role-playing sessions, and then started to analyze their sales calls each week. Now, within just a month, within 30 days, the difference was night and day. They went from avoiding the phones to actually feeling confident, and then their close rates went up significantly. And again, if you're in sales, that's the only reason to be in sales, is get those close rates up, right? So why am I telling you this? Because if you're a sales manager, these are exactly the types of transformations you can drive by implementing consistent training and analysis routines. But they have to be consistent. So let's talk about the first one. This is the one thing, we're going to talk about regular role-playing sessions. And by the way, this is the one thing that if there was something that sales reps hate more than cold calling, it's role playing in front of their peers, but iron sharpens iron. So first up, let's talk about this role playing. I know it can be a bit uncomfortable even for experienced sales reps, but it's one of the most effective ways to prepare for real life scenarios. My suggestion, implement weekly role playing if you're not going to do daily, or if daily is just a little bit too much. Definitely weekly role playing sessions. Keep these sessions short but focused. Some people say maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I'm more in the line of maybe 15, 20 minutes, right? I use the example of every major sports team out there before they take the ice, or they take the court, or they take the field, or what have you. They either do, they do on ice skate warm-ups and shooting. They do stretching, they're throwing the ball around, the batting practice, whatever it is. Sales is a lot like this. I mean, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars a year to play a sport, and they warm up before every game. Why are salespeople any different? So at least once a week, you should be doing role playing. I prefer daily, but I'm a little OG in that. That's how I got started in the sales, as a straight commission sales rep. We had to role play every morning. I do understand it can, if it's not done correctly, it can lead to burnout and start to have some diminishing effects. So I'll talk to you about that and how to avoid that. Well, the first tip to that is to not do role playing too long. I think it should be shorter. I'd rather have more mini sessions rather than longer sessions. So if you do it once a week, maybe bump it up to 30 minutes once a week, but I wouldn't go more than that. All right. So when you're focusing on handling, so let me give you an example. When you're doing the role playing, yes, I know a lot of people want to focus on handling objections, right out of the gate. That's not where I would start. Where you want to start when it comes to role playing is you have to break the sales process down into step-by-step format, markers, if you will. I prefer to call them steps, or bases. I'm more of a hockey guy, but if I had to use a sports analogy, sales, this is for everybody. Sales really is a lot like baseball, in the sense that no matter what you're selling, there really is a standardized process that a consumer has to go through before they make a decision. And every time you pick up the phone, you're in the batter's box, and your first objective is to get to first base first safely. So like in baseball, if you hit a double, you don't run from the batter's box across the pitcher's mound to second base, right? You have to go around touching all the bases. And where if you have a sales team and they're not closing as much as they should be, or deals are falling through the cracks, or deals that they should have closed are getting away, you're skipping steps. So when it comes to the role playing, make sure you break all the steps out. Don't go right to the objection handling, because if your team is coming to you saying, well, I'm getting this objection or this objection or this objection, the problem isn't the objection handling, it's the qualifying. If you properly qualify a prospect, you're going to minimize a lot of those objections. You still need to know how to handle objections when they happen, but the majority of when I listen to calls, or somebody brings me on and I do an analysis of their process, and I listen to some of their calls they've been doing, if they're not closing as much and they're getting a lot of these objections at the end, most of those objections could have been handled before they ever did a presentation, by learning to ask the right qualification questions early on. And by the way, sales techniques, the best sales techniques out there are subtle. So lots of small little sales techniques during the qualifying, which I could get into in a little bit, will eventually get rid of a lot of those objections that you don't even have to handle them, and you need to role play that. Now, before you ever get a conversation started, so you can ask those qualifying questions, one of the biggest challenges sales reps have today is getting somebody on the phone. They get shut down by gatekeeper, they're not getting their voicemails called, or when they do call and the prospect answers, they're so shocked and they go, oh, I didn't expect to get you. They've already started off on the wrong foot, right? Because they're so used to not getting somebody to pick up the phone. But you need to be prepared from the beginning. So step one, when you do your role playing for your team, you want to start with something basic, opening value statements. Just role play, pick out a lead on who you are. When you role play, this is really important, guys. When you role play, the person that's going to play the prospect has to write out who they are prior to starting. If you don't know anything about my background, I've been a straight commission inside sales rep for basically my entire adult working life. Never went to college, barely graduated high school. When I did get into sales, it was a straight commission job. Ever since then, I learned how to do it correctly. Now ever since then, I became an entrepreneur. I built and sold 7-figure companies before, and then I started Sales Buzz to teach a lot of these techniques. But the biggest thing that helped me launch my career, now just think about this: no college, barely graduated high school, broken homes, the growing up couldn't have been any worse, right? With that being said, I was still able to start a company on my own in the middle of the dot-com bomb, build it, and a few years later, sell it for 7-figure cash deal. How did I do that? Even in a down market, I knew how to cold call. I knew how to do outreach. I knew how to use the sales systems the sales techniques that worked, and I just outworked the system. I outworked the problem. I made more calls than my coworkers, but I had more conversations because I knew how to get the conversation started. And that all starts with your opener. So when it comes to practicing for sales managers, when you want to help your team, make sure you start from the beginning and you go, okay, we're going to start with openers, and the prospect or the person that's playing the role of the prospect has to write who they are. For those of you who have role played, have you ever role played with somebody and they kept changing their spots on you during the role playing? Like they've taken the 1,000 sales calls, sales rejection excuses that they had, and they put it all into one call. So no matter what you say, that's not really how things are going to go in the real world, right? So that's why you want to make sure if you're going to role play properly, make sure the person, and they don't have to tell the sales rep who they're going to be, right? But if you're going to role play, decide, okay, are you a decision maker? Are you part of the decision-making team? Are you an influencer? Are you an end user? Are you just an info gatherer, right? Just pick who you are and let them call to start the conversation. Now, maybe you can have some agreement saying, hey, let's start it off with, you're the prospect. We know you're the prospect I at least want to speak to. And so you're just going to answer the phone. Let's just have it be that rule. Make sure that that person has a pain point or not, and then it'll be up to you to see if you can get the conversation going. But that's the way to do it. So the thing is you want to start small. You want to start small. So opening value statement. So how many of you want to role play with me right now real quick? I'll give you a real world example as if I'm your sales manager and if you're a sales rep and you want to role play with me, and I'll show you how to do it real quick. Hey, Claire.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. I love your sessions.
Thank you. What do you sell, Claire?
I actually have consulting services. I think that I'm not really direct sales, but the example that I'd like to use is I have a free, it's a marketing 20 tips in 20-minute seminar. That's a webinar in Excel.
In Excel, you said?
Yes. So
okay. So do you sell Excel training?
Yes.
All right. And who is your target audience?
Businesses who use Microsoft applications. A lot of big businesses, everybody who uses applications uses Excel, just about.
You're selling B2B and they have to use Microsoft services. Now, that's everybody under the sun, but you have to get a little more niche than that, right? If you're going to be making successful outbound calls. So let me ask you this. And by the way, everybody that's listening, if you're a sales manager and you were hiring me to work for you, right? Let's say I submitted an application, I was hiring, and you say, hey, let's role play. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to role play. Let me just ask you a few questions first. Is that okay? So I can get this in context. This is what you should be doing as a sales rep too. So I want to know who my ICP is. So what we're selling is Excel training. It's business to business. They have to use MS. Now, let me ask you a question. What is the average company size that you sell this to?
I've worked all different company sizes, small, maybe 20 people, all the way to 10,000 people.
Exactly. And I'm glad you answered that way because everybody almost answers that way. Like for myself, let's just take for sales training. I've helped everybody from individuals to the largest companies out there like 3M and train over 10,000 of their reps, right? So I have everything in between. With that being said, I have there's very few 3Ms. The individuals are nice to help, but it's it's a lot of work for just a small thing. My sweet spot, companies that have between 5 and 50 sales reps, right? So just speaking from me, that's like who I look for if I was going to do some cold outbound prospecting. So when it comes to your Excel, yes, you can help everybody from a solopreneur who's doing MS to large corporations. But my question is, if you took all of the accounts that you have and you made a list of the ones who you like to work with the most, you made a list of your best clients, the ones that paid you the fastest, on time, easy to work with, etc., and then you analyzed that, what location, average employee size, average industry, and the average title of the person you normally speak to, what would that look like?
The average size would be not greater than 500 people.
All right, so that's going to fall into the 200 to 500 category on the standard charts. All right, and is there certain industries that work better for you that you notice? We already know it's B2B, but
No,
actual verticals?
because they run the gamut between
Yeah.
accounting companies that do green cities.
I got you. And I'm not cutting you off. I got what I need. Just for sake of time. So the last question before we do this role play, and I'm going to be the prospect first, and then I want to have this information. So if you need improvement, I want to be able to give it back to you. So regarding that, and by the way, sales managers, you should be knowing this stuff. You should be saying, okay, we're going to role play. It's going to be a company that's this size. This is what they do. This is what they have, etc. Okay. The last question is, who is the person that you almost always need to start the conversation with? Notice I didn't say who's the decision maker, because sometimes you're going to have a decision maker that they can pull the trigger themselves, and then another company with the same amount of employees, the same type of demographics and everything, they might have 3 different people that are involved in the decision making process, right? So that's what I'm saying. What is the title of the person that almost always is you have to start the conversation with when you're making those
Human
calls?
resources director.
Perfect. Okay, an HR director. All right, so I'll be the HR director. You ready?
Yes.
All right. Hi, this is Michael. How can I help you?
Hi, are you the human resources director?
Yes, I am. What can I do for you?
I am just curious in terms of how you provide business applications for your employees, training for business applications for your employees.
Okay, let me stop you right there. Let me add, I got 2 comments on this, but what do you normally hear?
I don't do it much, so I don't hear anything.
Okay. All right, so let me ask this. Why do we not do it much?
I stay busy with the clients that I have. However, the reason that I'm interested in doing this is just to build my skills in terms of, the elevator speech. If I go to a gathering and somebody asks me, what do you do? I like to be able to tell them in 2 or 3 sentences what I do. And particularly with banks, it piques their interest.
Okay, so see, now we do have a vertical. It's banks. Okay, so watch this. So the 2 things here is the first thing is you asked if I'm the HR director, right? If you're going to be doing outbound reach and you need to start doing it with an HR director, take 10 seconds, go to LinkedIn, pull that company up, or just go to Google and type in HR director or human resources director, space, +sign, space, and then the URL of that organization. So let me just give you an example. So if you went to Google and you did HR director, space, +sign, space, and then and whatever the URL, the company you're looking at, you should and it takes Google a second to pull things back. A lot of times you can see it that way, or you can go to Google or LinkedIn and do it that way. But so basically it's just a Boolean search, right? So when you go out to Google, you're going to type in the title of the person you want. You put a space in, then the +sign, then space, and then the @ symbol, and whatever their domain is. And a lot of times within seconds, you could find out who that is. And the reason why I wanted to do that is if I know the person I need to reach out to, and if I'm calling them and they answer the phone, they say, hi, this is Michael, like I did. I don't want to waste the question saying, is this so-and-so, right? One that's going to put me it's putting me behind the 8 ball a little bit as far as that goes. The second thing is we want to front load what it is that's a what's in it for them value statement. So this is a perfect example of why a company would want to role play. Actually, I'm going to unmute you just real quick, Claire. One question. What is the number 1 pain point your clients have to have that would make them buy what your solution is?
When they're using Excel, and this is not super experienced, but your average everyday user, I ask them, do you ever say there has to be a better way?
All right, so let's pretend you're the HR director, you work for a bank, and I'm cold calling you. You ready?
Yep.
You're the
Right.
HR director. I'm going to be the sales rep now. I'm going to show you, give you an example. It's just so good. So ring, ring, you answer the phone.
Claire Reynolds, HR.
Hey, Claire, this is Michael Pedone with exceltraining.com. Listen, the reason for my call, we recently helped ABC Bank get their, and whoever uses the Excel thing, I would use the title, get there to save about 15 hours a week by improving their Excel skills, just making them more proficient. And there's a possibility we might be able to help your team as well. I just need to ask you a few questions first, real quick. Would that be okay?
Sure. A few questions.
Do you see how that works, guys? So that's the role playing. Again, I'm making this stuff up on the fly, everybody, right? So if you guys heard the difference, what I did was if I'm the sales manager and I asked Claire to role play, her first time she role played with me, it was okay. Chances are you're going to hear a lot of no thanks, no shit. We already have something. Send me some information. And by your 10th call, your motivation, your sales rep's motivation is going to be in the tank. So how do we spin that around? How do we fix it? How do we take that same call and make it better? And so as a sales rep, you want your sales reps asking these questions, but you also want to be educating them too. It's like, okay, well, what's the title of the person I need to call? What do they do? What's the average employee size? Things of that nature, so I can build a profile, and then you build your lead list around that. So now, by the way, a lot of people are having a hard time with outbound. Companies are shifting to inbound, which means they're going to be cutting some dead weight, taking those salaries, putting them to the inbound advertising so they could drive inbound. But guess what? Those inbound leads are going to be expensive, and they're only going to go to the top sales reps. So the good news is this helps whether you're doing outbound or whether you're handling a warm leads as well, the strategy. Because look, if it was a warm lead, let's say Claire filled out a form and I got it, and she answered the phone. I said, hey, Claire, it's Michael Pedone with exceltraining.com. Listen, I understand you might be curious about what type of results your blank could get if they took our training. I'm sure you're probably curious about pricing and if we have any incentives available. I just need to ask you a few questions to see if what we have to offer would be a good fit for you so I could put this proposal together. Would that be okay? Right? Same scenario. Now, I do that on that, and I would role play that because it depends. Is it an inbound warm lead? We're going to handle that. It's still an opener. We still have to follow the same formula. The sales rep has to be confident enough. They don't want to call and just, hey, just getting back in touch with you or following up with your quote request. How can I help? I don't want to do that. I want to set the tone. Besides, if it's a warm lead, chances are you're only one of 3 other companies they probably reached out to. They could already be speaking to somebody that they might be kind of leaning towards. So you really have to have an opening value statement to know how to capture their attention. So when I say on a warm lead, I understand you might be curious about what type of results you're going to get and then you fill in the title of the person that would use the training, took our online training course. I'm sure you're probably curious about pricing and if we have any incentives right now. I just need to ask you a few questions to see if what we have to offer might be of some help to you. Would that be okay? And so that's on a warm lead. If it's a cold lead, I do the first one. Did you guys all follow that? And you, as sales managers, you want your reps. Now, I don't know her industry, and you see how I created that on the fly? That's as far as you have to role play on day one. 20 minutes, you have your team doing it, just an opener where you get in. See how I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but you guys, does that sound confident when I say that or no? When I gave those openings, and I've never sold what she sold in my life. I don't know her target audience or anything, but I'm using the same formula because no matter what I sold in my lifetime as a straight commission sales rep, I realized I have to get the conversation going. So I have a very specific formula that I use depending on inbound, outbound, cold, warm, whatever. And then I have different options I can use. I chose to use the competition template in this case when she said bank. So then I would make a list of all the banks and I would make a list of banks that matched her last client that she's happy with and that's happy with her. And then I'm going to target that, right? But if I have a different industry or if I don't have a similar industry, I would use a different opener that I have, but it's still the same formula. And you need your reps to sound as that confident in going through the role playing and just keep doing it until they're that confident in that step. And then once they're done with that step, notice how I'm gaining permission. See, a lot of things on LinkedIn, which I think is a really bad place to share, to learn a lot of bad sales techniques. But with that being said, there's a popular one out there on LinkedIn that says, I'm sure you're going to hate me. This is a cold call. Do you mind if I just take 27 seconds to say why I'm calling? You might get a lot of people say, sure, go ahead. But the reason why I would not recommend that opener is because you just put yourself in a bad position as a sales rep. You are now telling that you got permission to have 27 seconds of a data dump. So now instead of asking questions, which is going to get them to recognize a problem, which is the key critical solution to cold calling, you got to get them to recognize and tell them, for them to tell you have a problem. But if you say you have 27 seconds to hear why I'm calling, you put yourself in a position where you have to do a data dump now. And then you probably, if you're doing that, you were probably taught them to try to take control by asking a hard probing question to get them engaged. But if you do it that way, their guard is still up, in my opinion, right? Now, if you're doing it and it's working for you, great. But if you've tried that and hey, this works, only to the next step, and then you hear, send me some information, and you never get them on the phone again, I think you're going to use a better opener like I just did, where I want to pique their interest first and then gain permission to continue to call. Because if I pique their interest with the potential what's in it for them, and I say, I just need to ask you a few questions to see if what we have to offer might be of some help to you, would that be okay? And they go, yeah, sure. Their guard is down, their ears are up, and now you're going to have to role play the following week, or whenever your team is ready to handle and they can execute the opener better. Now you have to go into the next step, okay? Because most salespeople, once they get past the opener, they're like, what do I do next? They start pulling questions out of the air, and that's when have you ever done that, by the way, as a sales rep? Or if you're a salesman, do you ever hear one of your sales reps do that, where they got the conversation started, but they're kind of being a captain wing it, and they start, the prospect's interest was right here, and then as you start throwing questions out, you can actually hear their interest drop over the phone. Have you ever been in that scenario? You ever seen that? I'm sure if you've been in sales for more than a week or two, I'm sure you have, right? That's because the sales rep wasn't prepared on exactly what to say next. So as a sales manager, you want to train your team to be better at cold calling. Break the steps down. Openers. Don't move on until they're really good at that. And then determine how many different types of openers you have. If you have inbound warm leads, great, you're going to have an opener for that. If it's outbound prospecting, you'll have an opener for that. Okay, great. Either scenario, here's the great thing about what I teach. If you go ahead and have this system down, it's going to work with cold calling as well as warm leads and inbound leads, because once you get past the opener, the sales stages are the same. The only difference between a cold and a warm call is the interest level. You're cold calling somebody who matches your ICP. It's your job to pique their interest. On an inbound lead, a warm lead, they already have interest. It's your job to get the conversation started and gain permission so that you can still ask them the same questions you would if it was a cold call. Does that make sense to everybody? So now the next step would be okay, we got our openers down. We got cold, we got warm openers down. Now what? Well, now the conversation starts. So now you have to start with what I call engagement questions. That's the very next step. Your engagement question is a question that's going to place your prospect's attention in an area that you want them to be in. Again, doesn't matter if it's cold or warm. Sales step is the same. So then you got your engagement question, then your opportunity size question, then you uncover the pain point question, then you get their confirmation on that, right? There's these little stages, these little steps that you follow that you're going to have to become an expert at. And the first step of it is to do the role playing and to make sure that you have it down the right way. You don't want a salesperson playing the role of a prospect and then throwing every objection under the sun to start the role playing. You can do that in an advanced one once everybody covers their basis, then you can do that. But that's how I would recommend it for that. If you want to improve your sales team, regular role playing sessions have to be in play. The next thing is recording and analyzing their sales calls. If you can do that, that's going to be the best thing, because I'm going to tell you one other personal story. When I first got into sales and I was coming in to do role playing, and I was working with their number one sales rep in the company, and then he went ahead and taught me a technique. I went out and used it the next day. The following day, I came back to do our morning role playing, and I said, yeah, I tried what you said. It didn't work. And he goes, oh, really? So he pulls out a tape, because they actually recorded it and had it on cassettes. That's how old this is, right? Going way back, again, OG inside sales rep. And he goes, let's play it. And he plays it back. He had a recording of me using it. And I go, see, I said what you said and it didn't work. And he goes, no, you said something similar, but your tone and inflection was different. And you changed these two words. And it had all the difference in the world. If I didn't have the recording that he could play back for me to show me that what he said and what I'm saying, they were similar, but believe it or not, when it comes to sales and using specific sales techniques, exact wording and tone and inflection are vitally important. And if you change some wording around, or if you change your tone and inflection around a little bit, it can make all the difference in the world. And as a sales manager, you want to be able to say, listen, you're trying, we need to fine tune it. So it's almost like a Ferrari on the racetrack, and you got all the parts there, but the timing is off a little bit. You got to adjust the spark plugs, whatever, right? It's kind of the same thing. So I would make it really important to make sure that you are recording and analyzing their calls. And you definitely want to focus on feedback on real calls. Sure, you want to do that, not a problem. But to me, the best thing to do is schedule role playing for your team. Do those and do it in small stages, each step of the way, and then get the actual sales calls from on their clients, and then work with them on an individual basis. So you want to do role playing as a group, and then as a sales manager, you want to pull calls from individual reps and sit down with them. And if you map the sales process out, so watch this. My sales process is very simple. It's 4 phases, just like baseball, right? So every time I'm on the bat and I'm about to pick up the phone, I'm in the batter's box, you have to go ahead and get to first base first. That's your opening value statement. I have to pique their interest first and then gain permission. Once I get to first base first, I have to qualify them. Now, qualifying, to a lot of sales reps they think qualified is meaning they're in the right industry and they have the right title. That's not qualifying. That's a part of qualifying. For me, the number one thing for qualifying, the first thing you have to do for qualifying is you have to see if there's a problem there, that they admit to a problem. Because if there's no what I call problem recognition, if there's no problem to solve, there's no need to hear your solution, let alone pay for a solution. Does that make sense? And you can't call and tell them that they have a problem because they'll doubt it. So you have to know how to ask questions in the right formula that, based on their answers, they recognize that there's a problem there. And there's a series of questions that you have to ask to do that. And that's what you would have to role play. So once you're done with the opening value statement, you get that down. Now role play, engage with questions, opportunity size questions, pain point questions, blowing up the problem questions, right? Time frame questions. You want to ask all these little questions here. And again, the best sales techniques are subtle. So in other words, it comes across as a dialogue. It's not it's not an inquisition. We're not interrogating them. You have to know how to have that conversation, but you have to ask these right questions. And when you know what questions to ask ahead of time, when you can visually see the map, like I got to get to first base, and what does second base look like? Second base looks like a third of the way to second base is I got to get problem recognition. Once you learn how to do that and you role play with your team and they know how to ask the right questions where there's a problem there, then you want to go into the next phase of it, which is identifying their role in the decision-making process. You don't want to assume that they're the decision maker just because they have the right title. You want to ask the right questions that get to either confirm or deny that they're the only person involved. And then the third part of qualifying, this is very controversial. Almost every sales book I've ever read, almost every sales training I've ever taken, almost every sales manager I've ever had has always told me to bring up pricing at the end of the presentation. I wouldn't have survived as a straight commission sales rep. I wouldn't have been making 6-7 figures as a sales rep in my career if I did it that way. I like to qualify them on price. I don't pinpoint the exact price. I give a price range. So when I pique interest, I gain permission to continue the call. And then I ask them I start the qualifying questions with the engagement. I get problem recognition. I identify their role in the decision-making process. And let's say if they're high up on, if they're either the decision maker or part of the decision-making team, or even if they're an influencer who is asked to look into the solution, then I get into their time frame, what their ideal solution would look like to solve this problem. And then I'm going to give them a price range. I go, listen, Claire, everything you told me about XYZ, I think we can help, but your solution is going to be anywhere from this to this. If you end up liking what we have to offer and you decide you want to move forward with it, is that price range doable for you? And now they can only answer yes, no, or maybe. So if it's a yes, I'm done. Okay, great. Well, let me just tell you a little bit about it. I'll answer any questions you have. If you like what you hear, we can just take it from there. Fair enough? Okay, sure. Now I'm done with step 2. I'm now rounding third base. I'm going to do the presentation because they're fully qualified. We got problem recognition. I understand who they are in the decision-making process, what their decision-making process is, what their time frame looks like, what their ideal solution looks like. And guess what? Since I know all of that stuff, I was comfortable enough to tell them, listen, I have a full grasp of what the problem is and how this is challenging for you. I believe I have a solution. If you like my solutions, it's going to be between this and this. Is that doable? Now, I'm only asking that if they're qualified in the decision-making role process. If they're if they're rather an end user, or if they happen to be just an information gatherer and they don't have any of that power above, I would never tell them the pricing range on that. I would stop early once I'm in the phase of qualifying on their role in the decision-making process. If they're not the person I need involved in there, I'm going to have to run a different strategy to encourage them to get the right people in. No sense telling somebody about the pricing if they're too low on the totem pole. Does that make sense? By the way, everybody, Renee's asking, what if you work with custom products that doesn't have a price range until you're ready to quote? So I'm asking all these questions that's going to give me enough information to identify so I can go put that quote together. And then, so before I go do that quote, I want to make sure part of my sales process, Renee, is to identify what problems we're trying to solve, who else is involved in the decision-making process, what time frame are they looking at, what does their ideal solution look like anyway, if we could do all that. So you pepper those questions in while you're asking what other questions you have to ask to be able to build that quote accurately, right? And then you can go, okay, I'm going to go do this. Listen, it's not going to be any less than this. It's not going to be any more than, I know that's a big number. It's going to depend on a couple of factors. I'm going to go to work for you and get it the best price as possible. But if it's between this and this, and you decide you want to move forward, is that price range going to be doable for you? Now they might say, well, the lower end is, but not the higher end. Okay, thanks for letting me know. What's the highest end you're thinking there, just so I can make sure I quote the right stuff for you to give you just what you need and not anything else. So that'll run the price up. Well, between this and this. Okay, great. Let me go to work for you. So now it's still qualifying. Can you imagine? This is how I've been able to survive as a straight commission sales rep and build companies and teach other people to do it and then sell that company off. And then before I started Sales Buzz, this sales process is just, when you're right before you do the presentation, you have almost all the common objections you would normally get are out the window, right? I already know who they are. We got the pain point. We got the time frame. We got, their ideal solution. We already pre-qualified on the pricing. So now I just have to do the demo or do the presentation, go for the close and then wrap it up. And if I do get an objection at the end, it's not going to be, we can't afford it. I have to check with so-and-so. We don't have a need. We're under contract, right? We're not going to hear on all those things at the end, which a lot of salespeople who put things out of order. I mean, think about the sales process like a puzzle. Every piece has a place on the puzzle. And if you're using the wrong pieces, you're jumping ahead, it's not going to work. So there really is a systematic step-by-step process for this. And you have to, as a sales manager, you have to role play break them down in these small little steps and then role play and then listen to the recordings and then work individually with them on those individual areas until they get better. That's how you do it. And guess what? Some sales reps might get, if they're too uncomfortable with it, if they're not hitting their numbers, they're going to have to ship up or ship out, right? But the rest of them, you're going to start to get a much better, higher ROI on this stuff. Listen, some sales managers, they're just at their wits' end, right? The last 2 years have been brutal for outbound, and only the ones with the real sharp sales skills are surviving. They have to know how to cut through the noise. And especially if it's an inbound lead, I mean, those are gold. Now, the company spent a lot of money on marketing to get that lead, so you better make sure you're closing them. Even more of a case in point to role play each one of these sessions so that when you do get those inbound leads, you give it to the person that's going to close it the most. And if you're an individual sales rep, you want to be that person. How I got into sales, it was straight commission. This is no joke. There was a table. It had 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper on it, 2 columns of company names and phone numbers. And they said, those are your leads. Go grab a stack and then pick up the phone and start calling. And when you proved yourself enough that you could cold call and you figured it out and you got it working to where you started closing deals and it was 100% straight commission, you started closing deals, only then when you became one of the top closers when they occasionally got an inbound lead, and this is before the internet, right? So this is a phone call coming into the company, they would transfer that live call to one of the top sales reps. But you didn't get into that until you proved yourself on being able to prospect and cold call. And the only way you're going to be successful is you have to be really good at those techniques each step of the way. But here's the beauty of it. Other than the beginning of the cold call, everything else after that, once you get the conversation started, is the same, cold or warm. So if you perfect that, you're going to start closing a lot more deals on your cold calls, and then your company can trust you to handle those inbound warm leads. Record your calls, even if you're an individual sales rep. Listen back to them. There's going to be 2 sides of the fence here when it comes to recording calls and role playing. You're going to have some sales reps that are going to be too afraid to do it, and their ego just can't handle it. They're not coachable, things of that nature. You're never going to hit your a maximum earning potential that way. And then there's going to be other ones that are willing to do the role playing and willing to be coached on the call recordings. Those are the ones that are going to have the best success. You're going to get the highest ROI. Both parties will, the company and the individual. And as a sales manager, when you get your team full of, if you have a team of 5 reps, I would rather have 4 that are killing it and then take the rest of the salary into inbound leads, right? And have the company do it that way. So if you are a sales rep and you're at the bottom, you might want to invest in taking some time to learn how to cold call or get with your sales manager to have them help you improve that. And if you're a sales manager that's at wit's end and maybe cold calling with you, maybe you used to have a bunch of inbound leads and now they've all dried up and now you're that low hanging fruit's not there and you need to teach them how to cold call. Well, I have a solution for that. You just go to salesbuzz.com. Anybody that hits me up on salesbuzz.com, just fill out a quote request or take one of the free courses that's on there to put you in the right direction. And we could talk further about that. But these are the steps. If you're a sales manager, you have to break the steps out. You have to role play, and then you have to record your calls, and then you have to do individual assessments and work one-on-one with them. All right. I got a question that's coming in real quick from Faye. What is the distinction in the opening for cold versus warm? Right. I love this. So the difference is on a cold call, they're not raising their hand. That's what makes it cold. Right. So as a sales rep, if you're going to cold call, you want to ask the questions that I did in the beginning of this thing to make sure you know who your ideal customer profile is, and then build a list that matches that. Right. So the example I like to give in this is if I want to go bass fishing, I'm not going to go to Salt Lake because there's no bass in there, right? So I want to go to a lake that has lots of bass, and then I have to go at the right time of the day and with the right bait. Same thing with sales is I want to make sure I know I want to fish where the fish are. So that's the first thing. Know your ICP, build that list. And then when I'm doing the cold call, since they're not raising their hand, I can't call and say, I understand you may be curious about. I can't use that hook. Right. So I have to do what I did earlier. And like with Claire, when she mentioned that there's banks, so I said, okay, I'll use the competition one. Hi, so this is, I do my introduction, right? I say my name, I say my company. I slow that part down a little bit because I don't want to go too fast. Some of you are going to be a little nervous when you're doing this. So you might go a little too fast. And if you go too fast, if your cadence is too quick, they're going to stop you. They're going to interrupt you. They're going to, I'm sorry, who are you again? And what company are you with? Right. And then sales 101, the person asking questions is in what? The person asking questions is in what? Everybody should have been taught this on the first day of their sales, the very first sales job. The person asking questions is in control. I don't want to turn over control right away. So if I go too quick on my name and my company name, and then I say, I'm sorry, who are you getting with? I'm screwing up already. So I want to make sure I slow it down, say, hey, this is Michael Pedone with, and the example I gave was, exceltraining.com. And the reason for my call, can I pause for a second? I make that sound. That's just my personality. I'm using these things to make it sound real, even though in my head there's a script, right? I go, the reason for my call, we recently helped, and then I would name the bank I recently helped to do XYZ for them. And there's a chance I could help you too. I just need to ask you a few questions first. Sure. Would that be okay? So very non-threatening. That's the cold call. On a warm call, there's already some interest there. Now, a warm call, it could be the decision maker that reached out. It could be somebody that's part of the decision-making team. The difference there, by the way, if they're part of the decision-making team, it means you need and want their vote, but their vote alone doesn't get the deal done. There's somebody else that also has to say yes. So that's how you know that they're part of the decision-making team. They could be an influencer. An influencer means they have the ear of the decision makers, but they don't have a vote. And they could have been asked to look into it, but they don't have a vote, right? So we have that. Then there also could be an end user and an info gatherer, especially on a warm lead, right? They were tasked to look into this, but they don't have any of the data on what the pain points are, a time frame, the price range, or anything, what the ideal solution looks like, right? So knowing that ahead of time, I want to do the opener for them. Hey, I understand. Since I don't know which role they are, I got to get the conversation started. And since they were interested and they were a hand raiser, I want to set the hook with them for that particular fish. And that hook for me, one of the examples I gave was, I understand you may be curious about what type of results you could expect if your blank did this. I'm sure you're also curious about, pricing and if there's any discounts. And if I caught you a good time, I'd like to ask you a few questions just so I can see if what we have to offer might be a good fit for you, so I can send over that quote for you. Would that be okay? See how it's all front loaded for that vertical for the warm lead? I was like, yeah, because if they filled out the quote request, they are curious about 3 things, right? They're curious about what kind of results can they get, how much it's going to be, and is there any promos running right now? That's like the three most common things. So on my opener, I'm hitting them on a warm lead, right? But on a cold lead, I can't do those things because they don't even know what the call is about. They weren't doing it. So I have to lead with the pain point. I have to agitate a pain, scratch an itch, and then make it safe for them to say yes and give me, basically, I'm going to be in control, but it feels like they're in control because they're handing me control. I asked for that. If I caught you at a good time, I'd like to ask you a question to see if I can help you. Would that be okay? Notice I'm front loading it with, it's all about help and it's in their best interest. That's how you get the cold call going. But that's the easiest part. Most salespeople, where they screw up and where the close rates are low, whether it's cold or warm, is they don't know what to do after the opener. They don't know how they, to them, and again, that's why I use baseball. Got to get to first base first. We're there. Now I got to get to second. Second is qualifying. There's 3 phases of qualifying. Is there a problem? What role do they play? Can they afford it? If there's a problem and they're the only decision maker, but they can't afford it, are they qualified? Not at this point, not at this moment, they're not. If they can afford it, they make the decision on it, but they don't need it. Are they qualified? No, you need all 3. And you need to know how to get a conversation going so you can pepper in those questions to make sure they're fully qualified before you schedule a demo for the AE or do the demo yourself if you're full sales cycle or not. Make sense? All right, guys, we're way past time. If you have any other questions, feel free to email me or hit me up on LinkedIn. I'll make sure you guys get this the recording. If I can be of any help to you and your team, let me know. All right. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.